Welcome to this webinar organized by RECSM, the Research and Expertise Center for Survey Methodology, which is based at Universitat Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona. RECSM is a research center, as the name indicates, that focuses on survey methodology and is organizing this kind of webinars, seminars, but also winter schools and summer school. So if you're interested, you can check on the website. We are currently proposing a 3-week summer school at the end of June, beginning of July, I think. So you can check the program online. And for today, it will be a webinar of around 35-40 minutes of presentation, and then we will have time for questions. So I will introduce our speaker today, who is Carlos Ochoa. Carlos Ochoa is a PhD candidate at RECSM and UPF. And before that, he has been working for more than 15 years at NetQuest, which is the main online fieldwork company, I think, in Spain. And they also have panels in many other countries, both in Europe and in America and Latin America. And so Carlos today will present a paper with speaking about framing effects on willingness to participate in geolocation-based research. So if you have questions during the presentation, you can already, if you want, use the chat to put the questions, but we will answer all the questions in principle only at the end of the presentation. Okay, so Carlos, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie, and thank you for attending this presentation. As you can see, it's entitled Framing Effects on Willingness to Participate in Geolocation-Based Research. And the main goal of this webinar, of this presentation, is to share with you a finding that we came across while pursuing the main goal of my doctoral thesis, that is researching a new method to collect information from samples of individuals that is called in-the-moment surveys triggered by geolocation data or by other types of passive data. While pursuing this goal, we tried to make a secondary experiment using the same survey that we were using to measure the willingness to participate in some kind of activities. And we think it's interesting to share this finding because it's something that maybe you can apply in your future research when you collect data. So that's my goal. Remember that this project is part of a broader project that I will explain later on, that is called Web Data Up, that is funded by the European Research Council, and it's a project that is led by Melanie Revilla. The recent technological developments and the wide adoption of the internet by the population are clearly offering new opportunities to collect new data types that we can use for research purposes. That's the main idea of this broader project. What type of data types we are talking about? For instance, we can ask people to send us pictures and videos instead of sending some regular survey invitations, for instance. We can ask them also to send us audio recordings, also to share what they are doing online. This is something that we call online behaviors. Sometimes we call this also meter data, because meter is the name that we use to talk about the software that we need to collect this information. It's the software that you need to install on the browser devices to collect what they are doing online. And we have some other options. For instance, geolocation data to research something related to how people move around, or biometric data that we can collect using wearables, for instance. In all these cases, we have new opportunities, and the main goal of the Web Data Up project is precisely to investigate how some of these new measurement opportunities can help researchers to answer their research questions, basically in a more accurate way, and in some cases to get new data that can make possible to answer new questions that before couldn't be answered. This is the main goal of this project, but to be more precise, we are trying to answer 3 different questions. The first one, can we improve the quality of the data that we are using in our research by using new data types instead of conventional survey data? This is one clear goal of this project. Another question that we want to address is if we can replace survey data in some cases by these new data types. If so, it's a good opportunity not only to improve the quality, but also to reduce the burden on participants, because, for instance, it should be more convenient for someone to share his or her geolocation data using an application than reporting all the time by means of surveys where you are exactly in that precise moment. And finally, the third question that we want to address in this project is if we can achieve new insights. That is, if using new data types offer the opportunity to answer new research questions that could not be answered using conventional data. You can find more information about this project in our website. You have here the URL, and of course, we will share this presentation and the recording, so you can copy this URL to get more information about the project. Of course, there are many applications already used in several research projects using these new data types. For instance, online behaviors have already been used to research fake news consumption. Visual data has been used also to research how mosquitoes are spread over different regions using pictures of these mosquitoes. Regarding voice recordings, has been used as well to research the level of literacy, asking people to read loud some text in order to measure this level of literacy instead of directly asking about this topic. And of course, geolocation data is clearly a good option to research travel patterns, mobility, etc. But in all these cases, participation is always a challenge. And the existing studies that ask for samples of participants to share such data, in general, have found a large variation in the actual participation levels, meaning that in some cases, depending on the setting of the project, we can reach a larger participation rate or a lower participation rate, and there are several factors influencing this level of participation. For instance, after a literature review exploring projects that ask participants to share images, we have found that the actual participation rate reported in these studies goes from 10.2% to 62.5%. That is a huge variation. Also for geolocation data, the existing studies report actual participation rates from 30 to 69.5%. Again, a lot of variation sharing the same type of data. What is this? What is the reason we find this different participation level? There are several factors that affect the final actual participation in a project. So it's quite natural that we observe such differences. For instance, most or many of these new data types require technology. For instance, if we ask a sample of individuals to share what they are doing online, those participants need to install an application or a software on their browsing devices, and this is something that may be challenging. Okay, we are experiencing some problems. Can you confirm that you can follow my presentation and listen to me? Those yes. Right? Okay, and the image is moving. Okay, you can see that I'm passing the slides, etc.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for confirming. Thank you, Lucy. So as I was saying, so there are technical issues that can produce this variation. It's a clear factor affecting the actual participation. Also, the different skills required from participants to share new data types. In some cases, if we ask a sample of individuals to upload a photo to a survey, for instance, maybe somehow challenging, but if we ask them to install an application to collect geolocation data, etc., some people maybe are not able to develop such activities. So it's another factor that is really relevant. But probably the most relevant factor, of course, is the willingness to participate. It's a key factor. The extent to which people are willing to share these new data types that sometimes are sensitive data. This factor is so relevant that sometimes we are interested in measuring the willingness to participate in advance before developing the data collection project, because we need to make some decisions. Those studies that have measured the willingness to participate for these two specific data types, for instance, also observe a large variation in the willingness to participate, not only the actual participation of a project, but also the willingness to participate, collected by means of surveys. 17.7 to 65 for images, for instance, and 19 to 50% for geolocation data. So we have variation not only for the actual participation, but also for the willingness to participate. But the question is, why we are interested in measuring willingness to participate for a specific project? I mean, we have some figures to have an idea about the willingness to participate in general for these data types, but sometimes we are interested in the willingness to participate of our project, our specific project with our conditions and our goals. Well, we have several reasons to be interested in measuring the willingness to participate in our specific project. The first one is to assess if we can reach the minimum amount of data that we need in order to answer our research question. Because if the willingness to participate is so low that at the end we are not able to collect such minimum amount of data, maybe we need to consider a different approach, a conventional survey, any other method. A second reason to be interested in the willingness to participate is also to determine the specific conditions that we need to offer to participants in order to get the minimum willingness to participate and the minimum actual participation, because the actual participation depends not only on the data type, but also on the conditions that we are offering. For instance, the incentive level that we are offering or the project duration. A third reason to measure the willingness to participate is to assess if there are differences among different population groups, because if so, maybe we need to compensate, inviting more people from one group compared to the other in order to compensate the sample composition. And finally, when we have several alternatives available, when we have different methods that could be used in order to get the data that we need for our research, we need to make informed decisions. We need to assess the pros and cons of each method, and the willingness to participate is a critical factor to decide which method is best. So all in all, it's quite clear that we may be interested in measuring the willingness to participate. And here I reach the crucial point of this presentation, is that we are interested in assessing if the descriptions that we use for the activities when asking samples of individuals to participate or to declare if they are willing to participate in such research have an effect on the final willingness to participate that we observe. So basically, the crucial question is, does the way in which we describe research activities and the wording for the question, the final question asking, would you participate in this activity, have an influence, a significant impact on the willingness to participate that we finally measure. Formalizing a little bit more this broad research question, these are the goals of this paper that we published. As I said, the main goal is to investigate the effect of using different descriptions of the activities and different question wordings for such activities on the willingness to participate in two hypothetical geolocation-based research activities. So we used the opportunity that we had, because we had to measure the willingness to participate in geolocation-based research activities, to introduce an intervention in order to measure the effect of different descriptions and question wordings on the willingness to participate that we were interested in measuring. The underlying theory that we had is that emphasizing different aspects of the activities could have a significant effect caused by this framing effect. And I will explain what is the idea of the framing effect. This is the formal definition of framing effect. Is a cognitive bias wherein an individual's choice from a set of different options is influenced more by the presentation than by the substance, by the key information of the decision. For instance, sorry, because I cannot see my screen. I need to have some parts here. This is a very typical example. I will reduce the sense. Okay, thank you. This is a very typical example coming from market research. For instance, if you want to sell yogurts, maybe it's a better idea to present information about the fat content of the yogurt in the way that is on the right side, saying it's 80% fat-free, instead of saying that the yogurt has 20% of fat. It's quite clear that you are leading people to prefer the first option, the right option, okay? And the information is exactly the same. It's just the way you are framing the same information. There are some other examples, not only from market research, but also, for instance, in health research. It's quite clear that it's more effective to highlight the positive outcomes of practicing sports instead of highlighting the negative consequences of a sedentary lifestyle. And the same for politics, for instance. It seems more effective as well to highlight candidates' qualifications instead of the lack of qualifications of the opponent. So this is a general and well-accepted effect that influence the decisions that we make. Well, the idea is that we wanted to explore this framing effect by emphasizing two different aspects of the participation in these geolocation-based research activities. And we wanted to compare these two treatment groups to a neutral group. What were the aspects that we were interested in emphasizing? The first one was the need for commitment. So when asking people whether they would participate in geolocation-based research activities, a group of individuals saw this wording in which we emphasize the need for commitment. Basically, we said before answering this question, we would like that you be completely sure that you can commit to participate. Don't ask yes because you think you would participate, because it's important for us that you commit. Okay. The idea was that in general, when we ask people about hypothetical situations, they tend to say yes. This is a well-known effect that is known as yes setting that affects not only this kind of questions, but any survey question with yes and no options. So we wanted to correct a little bit to mitigate this bias by adding this emphasis on the commitment. The second group that we tested was this group that saw a data safety emphasis. This is quite interesting because in general, it's well known that one of the main concerns that prevent people to share geolocation data and in general new data types is related to safety concerns and in particular privacy. So a natural reaction of researchers when presenting this kind of activities is to add information, ensuring that the data will be handled safely, that your data is safe with us, these kind of messages in order to give peace of mind to participants. We wanted to measure the effect of emphasizing this kind of data safety. Okay. The hypotheses related to these two treatments are the following. For the first group, for the commitment group, our expectation was that, of course, people presented with this emphasis on the need for commitment would show lower willingness to participate, because in fact, we are asking them to show lower willingness to participate. So this is quite clear that if we emphasize the need for commitment, we are affecting negatively the willingness to participate. But the interesting thing, not so obvious, that is also for the second group, we expected a lower willingness to participate. Because after reviewing existing literature about emphasizing different aspects in surveys, also tell us that when we emphasize some potential concerns in advance, when we try to anticipate a potential concern in a survey, in general, participants tend to use this kind of mental shortcuts to infer that there is something wrong with the activity. So if I insist too much that this is safe, nothing wrong will happen to you, everything is under control, etc., the reaction will be just the opposite. Okay, there is something dangerous with this activity. So this is interesting because, in fact, many researchers, when asked people to share new data types, tend to add these safety assurances. And our hypothesis is that this is not a good idea in general. So we wanted to prove as well this hypothesis. Let's talk a little bit about the two hypothetical geolocation-based research activities, on top of which we added these treatments with different emphasis, because it's relevant to understand on top of which kind of activities we are emphasizing different aspects. Both activities were related to geolocation data. And we all know that geolocation data are great for researching many things related to transportation, mobility, etc. Because individuals' locations collected by means of technology show higher precision that cannot be reached using conventional surveys, and reduce the burden on participants because you are delivering the data without effort, let's say. But in general, geolocation data are great for this purpose, but are not perfect. When we collect geolocation data, we suffer some types of errors. For instance, the reduced precision of the GPS system. Sometimes we are not completely sure if someone, for instance, visited a location of interest, because we have this margin of errors that can go from 1 meter to sometimes 100 meters. So is relevant the size of this error. And on top of this error related to the precision of the system, collecting geolocation data tell us nothing about, for instance, the purpose of a visit, and cannot confirm if someone really visited a location of interest. So it could be interesting. It could be interesting adding survey on top of the geolocation data. This is the main purpose of my doctoral thesis. Is something that we call in-the-moment surveys. The idea is that we ask a sample of individuals to share geolocation data, and we determine some locations of interest in a way that when someone visits such locations of interest, we can detect that they are close to the location of interest and send them a survey asking, for instance, about missing information, asking them to clarify that whole information. And the idea of sending the survey right in the moment is to reduce those errors that are produced by memory failures, let's say. So it seems much better to send a survey, let's say 15 minutes after the visit than 1 day, 2 days, 1 week, or even 2 months. That is the case in most, not in many surveys that ask us to report things that happened maybe 1 month ago. Okay, so the idea is sending the survey right in the moment when we detect someone is visiting the location of interest. Very briefly, at the end, we were interested in the willingness to participate in these 2 different groups of geolocation-based research activities. The first one is simply to share geolocation data. We wanted to know if people were willing to share geolocation data in a continuous way for any purpose. And this is very relevant. In this description, we said, ask your geolocation data, and we will use the geolocation data as we wish, without any specific purpose in advance. The second group of activities is the in-the-moment survey. And this is very important. In this case, we stress the idea that this data was supposed to be used to detect if you are visiting a location of interest, but we were not recording the geolocation data. So the data was used only to detect your visit, but the data will not be stored, let's say. These are the 2 activities that we wanted to measure the willingness to participate in. Let's talk about the methods and the data that we used to assess the willingness to participate. We decided to use a choice-based conjoint analysis. That is a method by which, instead of directly asking people whether they would participate in an activity with direct questions, we use comparisons of different scenarios of activities to measure the overall willingness to participate in all the potential combinations. So the idea of a conjoint is repeating, in this case, 10 different questions. In each question, we offer 2 research activities as a combination of different attributes, for instance, the duration of the project or the level of incentive or some other attributes. And analyzing the choices of the participants, we can infer the actual willingness to participate in such activities, and also the influence of each one of the attributes used to define the activities on the final decision. Okay. The coefficients of the statistical model that we use, that is a multinomial model, are called utilities. So whenever you listen to this word, utilities means this influence that could be positive or negative on the final willingness to participate measured in a conjoint analysis. And I said that the activities were a combination of different attributes. what are these attributes that we use to describe the activities? First attribute was the distinction between these two activities. So one attribute was the research activity, sharing geolocation data, versus in-the-moment surveys triggered by geolocation data. A second attribute was the project duration, going from 1 week to 1 year, and also a level that says that the sharing was indefinite. The invitation lifetime that applies only to in-the-moment surveys. That is the available time that you have to answer a survey that was received in the moment. We also explored the effect of the geolocation incentive, going from 1 point per week to 8 points per week. And these points are the, let's say, the currency that the online panel that we use to develop this research is using to reward people in exchange for participating. So we attach to this internal currency of the panel in order to measure the effect of different incentive levels. We also had an attribute describing if we gave higher incentive for a survey to be in the moment compared to a conventional survey. So we said in some cases we will reward you twice the number of points that you normally receive for participating in a conventional survey, or 3 times or 4 times. Okay. And the last attribute is the length of the interview, only again for in-the-moment surveys. So the gray attributes are specific for in-the-moment surveys, and the black attributes are for both types of activities. The data were collected in 2022 from February to March using the NetQuest opt-in online panel in Spain. We got more than 1,000 valid surveys that were split in the 3 different treatment groups that I will detail later on. The average length of the survey was close to 9 minutes, and we used quota sampling in order to reproduce the proportions of the online Spanish population in our sample. Going to the specific intervention that we made in this survey in order to measure these different emphases. This is the general structure of the survey. We have like 6 different blocks: the initial questions to control quotas, and then we had this 1 page for describing the activities, the geolocation-based research activities, then a page describing the attributes of the research activities and how the questions, how were designed the questions that were presented in the next section. And then we had these 10 different questions with the same format, but 10 times, and different composition of activities, asking about the choices of the participants. The treatment was focused on these 3 sections: the activities descriptions, the instructions about the choice questions, and the choice questions. And for each one of these 3 different blocks, we designed a different wording, different description as well, for the neutral group, the commitment group, and the safety group. The neutral group was presented with a, let's say, descriptive wording without any particular emphasis. But then the commitment group was presented with a wording designed to emphasize the need for commitment, and the safety group with a wording that emphasized. Okay. ¿Cómo? Sí. The message is from the main computer, not mine. Okay. Just to give you an idea of what kind of intervention, what kind of emphasis, what do I mean when I say that I emphasize commitment or safety? This is the first page for the neutral group. As you can see, we presented a description of the activities: sharing your geolocation data. To participate, you would have to install an app, etc., etc. And for in-the-moment surveys, also a description that you need to install an app, etc. But only for the purpose of sending in-the-moment surveys. If you detect that you're visiting a location of interest, you will receive an invitation to take a survey. It's relevant here to pay attention to this section of the wording, because we said that for the in-the-moment group, that your geolocation would not be stored in general. It would only be used to detect your access to a place of interest. I highlight this because we think that this difference between the 2 activities has a relevant impact on the final results that I will show you later. Then for the second group, the commitment group, we simply added the word commit in several places, and we added this final sentence saying, if you would participate in these activities, it's very important that you commit to complete them. This is the sentence that we added to prevent people answering yes without a clear idea if they really are willing to commit to participate. And for the safety group, we removed the commit word and we added another sentence mentioning all these considerations about the safety of the data. Your geolocation data would only be used for the purpose described, and they will be collected with the maximum security measures and would be eliminated as soon as they were analyzed. These are the kind of interventions in this first page. For the next pages, very similarly, we will go through them. This is the second page for the neutral group, a description of the attributes. For the commitment group, we again added this sentence related to the need for commitment. And for the safety group, we added again the same sentence that was presented in the previous page, mentioning the security measures. Finally, the choice questions were also modified in this way. This is a typical choice question with, you need to consider that proposal A and B is changing all the time for different participants and different questions. This is for the neutral group. For the commitment group, we added 4 times the word commit to, so it's quite clear that they had to commit. And for the safety group, we added the same sentence as before, again, as a reminder. Well, let's talk about the results of this experiment. This is the willingness to participate that we measure for the neutral group, for sharing geolocation data, and for in-the-moment surveys. As you can see, the willingness to participate is close to 50%, and is slightly higher for in-the-moment surveys compared to sharing geolocation data. Why? It's interesting because in-the-moment surveys, in fact, require a larger effort because you need to take the survey besides sharing geolocation data. Our guess, because we don't have enough information to answer this, but our guess is the main difference is the need to store the data. And the sharing geolocation data, we need to store the data, or we said that we store the data, and in the moment surveys, we don't store the data. So this is a potential explanation for this difference. When we emphasize the need for commitment, as we expected, the willingness to participate is clearly decreased, okay? 7 percentage points for sharing geolocation data, and 6 points for in-the-moment surveys. So in both cases, statistically significant at 5% level. So we confirm our initial hypothesis. Insisting on the need for commitment can only decrease the willingness to participate. But more interestingly, emphasizing the safety also decreases, as we expected, the willingness to participate. So the effect was 5.9 percentage points for sharing geolocation data and 4.1 percentage points for in-the-moment surveys. So it seems that we have a negative effect, also significant compared to the neutral group. Okay. It's relevant as well that the effect of both treatments, commitment and safety, is slightly different for both activities. In principle, we consider that sharing geolocation data is more sensitive because we store the data. And it seems that insisting on safety is worse for sharing geolocation data compared to in-the-moment surveys. If you compare these two numbers, the commitment group, the effect was minus 14.8% in relative terms to the neutral group for sharing geolocation data, and was 13.1% for in-the-moment surveys. But when we apply we add this emphasis on safety, the difference between these two numbers is larger and is significant. The difference between 14 and 13 is not significant. The difference between these 12.4 and 8.2 is significant. So again, it confirms in principle that insisting on safety is even worse if the activity is sensitive. Okay, so it's like a confirmation of the underlying mechanism that we are trying to understand here. Finally, the method that we use to analyze the data allows us to also assess the relevance, the importance of the different attributes on the decisions of the participants whether to participate or not. So for sharing geolocation data, the analysis that we made reveals that the decision that participants made to participate or not depended on 51.8% on the project duration and 48.2% on the geolocation incentive. So more or less a similar importance of both aspects that we use to describe this activity. Interestingly, again, when we emphasize the need for commitment, the relevance, the importance shift to the project durations. So it seems logical that when we insist you need to commit, then you think twice and you consider also the project duration. I need to commit for how long? Okay, this is in principle something that we observe here with this change in the importance of the project duration. When we emphasize commitment, is significant, the difference. And when we emphasize safety, we also observe a shift of the importance towards project duration, but in this case, it's not significant. It's slightly lower. Okay, so if we insist on the safety, people pay more attention to the project duration. Regarding the in-the-moment surveys activity, we use 5 different attributes to describe the activities: the project duration, the geolocation incentive, the survey incentive, the invitational lifetime, and the survey length. And these are the different percentage of importance that was assigned by participants to each one of these attributes. The most relevant attribute in this case is survey incentive, 23.8. When we emphasize commitment, when we emphasize that you need to commit to participate, again, the importance shifts to the project duration. So people pay more attention to the project duration, and very similarly for safety, but to a lower extent again. In this case, the difference between the importance of the project duration for the neutral and the commitment group is significant, but it's not for the safety group. Finally, we use a different point of view. We group all these activities together, and we compare the importance of these attributes. We group all these attributes together, and we compare the importance of all the attributes compared to the attribute describing the type of activity. So we wanted to assess the difference between the two activities, regardless of the other attributes. For the neutral group, the distinction between the two activities accounted for this 5.3% of importance. When we emphasize the need for commitment, the importance of the type of activity, the importance of the distinction between these two activities was slightly decreased, but not significantly. But very interestingly, again, when we emphasize the safety, when we added these messages saying that your data is safe, etc., people pay more attention to the distinction between the two activities, which again seems to be related to this crucial difference between the two activities. We need to store permanently or indefinitely the geolocation data in the first activity, while we don't need to store this data to detect that you are visiting a location of interest. So again, it makes sense with this idea that emphasizing safety is not good, and it's even worse if the activities is particularly sensitive. So to summarize, basically, it seems that the estimates of willingness to share data are substantially affected by the way research activities are presented to individuals. So different descriptions have a different influence on the willingness to participate. We observe an effect of -7 percentage points when we emphasize the need for commitment, up to -5.9 percentage points when we emphasize safety. These effects were found to be related to a shift in the relative importance. So it seems that when we emphasize commitment, project duration becomes more relevant. When we emphasize safety, also project duration becomes more relevant, but especially the distinction between different projects that could be differently sensitive in terms of the type of data that we are collecting. Some recommendations to you or to us as researchers in the future. First, we need to be aware that the descriptions of the activities that we use can clearly influence the level of willingness to participate, intentionally or not. And I say intentionally because in some cases, we could be interested in affecting the willingness to participate. For instance, if we want to get a conservative measure of the willingness to participate more close to the final actual participation, it's perfectly okay to emphasize commitment, for instance. But we need to be aware. What is probably not acceptable is to influence without noticing that we are influencing the willingness to participate. So we should carefully evaluate the way we describe activities. We need to check 1 time, 2 times, 10 times the description to pay attention to each word, because each single word could affect the willingness to participate. The second treatment, we only added this commit to several times. So it's not a big, it seems that it's not a big deal, but at the end, it represented 7 percentage points. And this is very important. Of course, participants must be informed of the implications of their participation, and they need to receive all the information regarding the safety, etc. But this is one thing, and the other thing is to insist too much, adding again and again messages about safety, your data is safe, etc. We need to give the information that is required because we have a regulation for this, for instance, the GDPR, but we don't need to insist too much, because insisting too much is not a good idea in order to get a higher level of willingness to participate. Final slide. Of course, this research has some limitations. We have studied only the willingness to participate, not the actual participation in certain research activities related to geolocation data, and based on a sample of participants that belongs to an online panel, and therefore they are very used to participate in surveys and other research activities. However, there is nothing to suggest that these effects would not be observed in different scenarios with actual participation, other types of activities, and with other types of participants, because the underlying mechanism seems to be quite general. It's not very specific about this specific research. And of course, further research is needed to test the robustness of these results, to determine if we could use the framing effect in our favor, if we could use a positive framing effect, for instance, insisting on the incentive. You have an extra incentive for sharing this geolocation data compared to a conventional survey. Maybe adding several times this message could have a positive effect. And of course, we use a conjoint analysis. It would be interesting also to test if the same result is observed for conventional survey questions, asking simply yes or no. That's all from my side. You have the references for the 2 papers related to this presentation. The first one is specific for the framing effect, is more or less what I have explained today. And the second one is the broader paper talking about geolocation research, geolocation-based research activities. Thank you very much.